Some of you know me. Some of you have been my students. I'm very glad that you are joining us today. So let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Lorena Núñez. I work for the English department. I work with certifications, training for certifications, and also sometimes help with logistics, or sometimes a supervisor or invigilator for some exams. Well, very briefly, this talk is going to be about five core skills that you need for academic exams. My expertise is more on the Toefl than on the Ielts. However, I am going to mention what these exams have in common, again, in terms of skills. If you need some other kind of information, the previous talks can help you with that. But today I'm going to mention what these exams have in common, what they measure in terms of skills, and how you can develop these specific skills for academic English exams. The first thing I would like to do is to define academic English. It is very important to make a distinction between the type of English that we use every day and the type of English that we need for studying and learning. So what's academic English? I'm going to use this definition from the University of Cardiff. It is a genre of English that we use in the world of research, study, teaching, and universities, especially at the college level. When are we using academic English? When in like everyday life can you find it? You are using academic English when you read specialized books, articles, and different materials in your field of work or your field of study, academic journals. When you also listen to someone giving a presentation or a talk, when there's a talk about academic subjects in an academic environment. Also, when you write papers or articles, if you do research, then when you write papers, if you write some articles, abstracts, etc. Also, when you give a presentation or lecture in academic settings, this is, of course, in any language. It can be Spanish, it can be English, it can be French. The academic language presents some features. There are some specific characteristics of academic language in general, but today we will talk about academic English. So what are some characteristics of this language, academic English? It uses formal language, avoiding colloquialisms. Colloquialisms are slang or informal expressions, some idioms, right? All of them are considered more informal, sometimes even contractions. No? Contractions are not colloquialisms, but they are not used in formal academic language. Another feature is that it usually avoids the pronoun I. It's written in a more impersonal way. So it's usually, it is more frequent to see the passive voice or sentences that start with it instead of with I or you. It's written in third person sometimes as well, uses impersonal structures. It's more objective and impartial. So usually the adjectives and adverbs are used very carefully here, and they're just a collection of adjectives or adverbs that just talk about changes or talk about very objective characteristics or distinct characteristics, language is not that descriptive in that sense. Now, it is tentative and cautious. Tentative and cautious means they usually present information as opinions sometimes, no? Like, I mean, not as given facts, but more like using a model sometimes if the opinion, if the information has not been verified extensively, right? So it's tentative and cautious. It means uses some modal verbs or uses some adverbs to tone down the strength of the information, right? Even if it is objective and they are facts. There are lots of references, that texts are well structured. These two things today we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about what the structure is. There are well-developed paragraphs that often start with a strong topic sentence. This is also something important for you to consider, especially for the people who are in PG 8-9. They will understand what that means now, to start your paragraph well, to write topic sentences. If you are in PG 6, you're probably in the basics, studying the basics of this organization. There are linking words. That's also something that I really like about academic English, the way that it is articulated through linkers, connectors, transitions in general, no? And they will give the text cohesion. Cohesion means the text, I mean, if you compare it to something, it can be to a wall, and the wall in a house is very well built. No, I would say looks very firm and looks complete. No, so that will be cohesion when the wall is all put together and it has like glue in the middle. That would be text cohesion. Now, the next examples are real examples from academic English. No, as I told you, it's usually found in specialized magazines, textbooks, articles, specialized literature, right? And if you are in college, I am sure you have found it more than once, no? Because this is usually the environment or the context in which we work every day. So for example, here we have the title, no, the effects of handwriting experience on functional brain development in pre-literate children. As you can see, the vocabulary is different. It's usually higher than B2, right? Higher than B2. And you will see words that are specialized, no? Like functional or pre-literate. No? So another thing in academic English is that I would say 70% of a text is upper intermediate or intermediate general English vocabulary, no? But not basic. Upper intermediate general English vocabulary like brain, development, experience. These words are in general English. But 30% more or less is specialized vocabulary or have to do vocabulary that has to do with the matter at hand, has to do with the topic. A proportion of 70-30, I would say, which means you don't start from zero. When you start in academic English, you don't start from zero. You already have 70% of the knowledge, provided that you are already in a level B1, B2. So you don't start from zero. It's not another language that you have to learn besides English. However, let me tell you that even native speakers have to learn academic English, as you and I had to learn academic Spanish when we started studying, and as we develop our career or our major, as we complete our major, we also have to learn academic Spanish. So here, for example, there are other, this is the complete abstract here. An abstract is like a summary of an article, a research text. And for example, the sentence that I selected here shows what academic English is, in my opinion. No? Look at the vocabulary. I'm going to give you, I would say, 20 seconds to read the sentence I underlined in red. And I wanted to look at the change in vocabulary, at the way it is expressed and written, what grammar structures you can find, etc. All right, so you can make some comments in the chat, but definitely we can agree that the article is going to be really interesting, but it's also going to be difficult. I mean, it's not something that you would like to read for relaxing, no? For relaxing maybe, or just for fun, or for passing time. Although it's a very interesting article, the purpose of reading it would be mainly for learning or for your own research, for writing a paper, for writing a summary, etc. Right? So here is an example of how there is a change in English when you use it for academic purposes. Here's a minute of a lecture. Lecture is this type of class in which a professor, usually in the United States, this is much more the style in the United States. A lecture is this type of class we will observe in a minute. This is a Psychology 101 class in a real university. I think it's the MIT.
And so we're going to try to say that we constantly think, you must in your everyday life think about, why do you have your preferences, your desires, what's easy for you, what's hard for you, what's delightful for you. Why do other people behave the way they do? How do they think? How do they feel? And so there's a lot of realms of this that are tough to get to by science, but what we're going to focus on this semester is, where's the scientific approach to shed light, in the way that we're used to in thinking about experiments and evidence about how humans tick. And as we go through this semester, we'll talk about the brain. We'll talk a fair bit about chapters from this book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, from Oliver Sacks. It was a bestseller, even when it wasn't assigned for a course. It's a great book. You'll enjoy it.
Okay, now in the chat, tell me, what do you observe in the change? I played it with some subtitles so that you were able to grasp more content. But what do you observe from the articles and from this information? What type of content does it have? I want to read you in the chat. Okay, I'm getting some answers here. What is the change that you notice in this information?
And so we're going to try to say that.
Yes, okay. The man talks fast, but I presume he's a teacher. Yes, exactly. Well, that's the first change, no? In academic language, we usually call teachers professors, no? That's like the first change when you talk about, let's say, a teacher in a college or university, you call this teacher professor, right? And we address to professors formally, no? For example, then we say Professor Rogers, Professor Michaels, etc. So we have the level of speech, no? He starts to give a little bit of specialized vocabulary. He mixes this with some informal language, no, to make it to make the information more accessible, but in the end, it's a hard subject, right? He's not talking in first person. Paola also says the teacher uses words specialized in psychology, right?
We constantly think you must in your everyday life think about, why do you have your preferences, your desires, what's easy for you, what's hard for you, what's delightful for you. Why do other people behave the way?
All right. So as you see, I mean, academic English is not completely another language, but it has special features that make it, I would say they don't make it difficult, but I would say they make it complex, in the way it has to be, because research and advanced thinking processes are done through this type of language. So it has to reflect, the language has to reflect the processes that happen, processes of learning and understanding, right? So there was a question from one of the previous chats, and this question was, is it true that to pass the Toefl, IBT, or the Ielts, I also have to be like an expert in academic skills? I mean, is it also a matter of, skills, or my English knowledge is enough, no? And that question was really interesting, because I would say there is an ongoing debate about it. No? There is an ongoing debate. And some people would say, no, you don't have to be an expert. If you speak English, you will pass this exam successfully. If your English is advanced, you will do fine. You will be fine. No? But on the other hand, some people say no, especially when you take these exams, they will say, no, if you speak English, still you will have some difficulty. So these people will say, yes, you need other skills apart from just English. So there is an ongoing debate. I wanted to share that with you. It's not that simple, right? Not that just, yes, only English, general English is fine, or no, you have to learn many other things before you take these exams. No, so after this talk, I hope that you have a better idea of what you need to learn and develop, right? You make a checklist, as I told you. So we define academic skills. This information is from the Metropolitan University of Cardiff. It is the definition of academic skills, not for exams, no, but academic skills in general for all students, especially at college level. And they are aspects of behavior learned by students that are required, no, this is something important, required to operate successfully at the level of higher education. Remember that when we take an exam like the Toefl IBT or the Ielts academic module, it's because we want to study, we want to join a series of classes, or we want to join a program abroad in an English-speaking university. Not just in the UK or the United States, but across the globe. We have many universities that teach classes in English in Europe, for example. I think also in China, Korea, Japan, you can find English-speaking or classes in English everywhere in the world. So when you take an academic English exam, it is because you usually want to pursue education abroad. And so what you have to show is how you can use your English skills, the ones that you have, your speaking, your writing, how good is it? But to operate successfully at the level of higher education, that means college, usually also, well, high school, So high school, college, graduate courses, postgraduate courses. Is this okay? Up to here? How are you doing? So when these exams test you, they test you not on your mental skills, let's say, because some students get really confused and say, the exam was really difficult because it was not about English. Some students will say that in the end. No, they say it was not about English, it was about how well I can do in school. Not really. This is not an aptitude test. Just remember that neither Toefl IBT nor Ielts are aptitude tests, right? They test only English, even if the content is unfamiliar or even if the content is complex. What are some of the academic skills now that are needed to succeed now in the exam? Now we talked about academic skills as abilities you require to be successful when you study. So what are they? Today I'm going to discuss the basic ones, right? The complex ones are listed here. I'm going to stick with the ones that are useful for exams. There are some core skills like academic writing. By the way, we do have at the UNAM, we have a program of academic writing in English conducted by specialists in CEU, I think. Academic writing, presentation skills, referencing, which is like the core of academics, citing other people, sharing ideas, but then also giving credit to these people. No? And these three, academic writing, presentation skills, and referencing, underpin. Underpin means they are the basis of more complex skills, such as, among others, critical thinking and reflective practice. You want to become a professional, you want to be a critical thinker, not just repetition of patterns, but something else, no? Like creativity. So what skills, because this sounds like very, very sophisticated. Sophisticated. So what exactly do I need for the TOEFL or IELTS exams if I am in PG7 or PG9? Well, there are some skills that reflect, in the English exams, there are some tasks. A task is like a question, no? They will ask you to do something. So there are some tasks in the TOEFL IBT and the IELTS that are carried out by college students in their everyday life. Now you tell me in the chat, what are some of these activities? Think about your last day of classes, like a couple of weeks ago, maybe. So what are some of the things that you have to do as a student? Well, I was a student a very long time ago, and I'm sure it hasn't changed. Usually the professor assigns a reading and we have to read it, and then we have to write a report, the summary, a mind map, all of those things. Andrea Donaciano says to write an essay. Now read a lot, exactly, to read a lot extensively. To apply, to design prototypes, to come up with your own information after revising a lot of sources. So basically, everywhere in the world, students have to do the same things, right? Everywhere in the world, as you may know, students share many activities, and these activities, these tasks, are reflected in the academic English exams. For example, what are some, and I'm saying really some of the academic tasks in English include obtaining the main ideas and major details of a short lecture or a reading passage. As I told you before, the lecture is the video I showed a moment ago, but it's not on video. Writing summaries or reports. In the Ielts, you will write a summary, but it's from a graphic. I'm going to show you in a moment. It's not really a summary of a text. In the Toefl, you write a summary of a text and a recording. This is from the Toefl IBT reading practice questions, right? If you are now, for example, in first certificate, you will notice the difference in the content as well. No? Articles in the first certificate, we usually look at articles, reviews, novels, extracts from novels. I would say newspaper, opinion text, magazine, opinion text. So here is paleontologists have argued for a long time that the demise, let's see this, look at this word, is of higher difficulty of dinosaurs, was caused by climatic alterations, another specialized type of vocabulary, the position of continents and seas resulting from plate tectonics. No? So you see some vocabulary that is specialized, right? It is important to clarify that you really don't have to know anything about the topic. The questions will not test you on how much you know about dinosaurs, right? They will test you on how fast and how accurately you can get the important information from this reading, not really in how much you know previously about dinosaurs, right? This is one example. By the way, I'm going to share this presentation with you, so you will have the links. The other example is from the Ielts. And in the Ielts, then you would have a text. And the questions are rather different. You will have to complete a table, no? They call this type of task table completion. And there is again another reading here, no? By the early 19th century, men such as John McAdam and Thomas Telford have created a British road network. And then it has more details about the railway age. And then in this type of question, they will ask you to fill in a chart. No? They will ask you to get specific details from this chart, from this text. And not like a summary, but more in terms of if you can identify and summarize something important features of a text, right? There are other types of questions in the Ielts that are also of like distinct of the academic. Distinct means características, distinct of academic Ielts. No, but this is one of the hardest. Now in the Toefl, summaries are also present as academic tasks. An introductory sentence for a brief summary of the passage is provided below. Complete the summary by selecting the 3 answer choices that express the most important ideas in the passage. Some sentences do not belong in the summary because they express ideas that are not presented in the passage or are minor ideas in the passage. Yeah? So something important is to know how to summarize information correctly. This is what we will talk about today. By the way, when I was trying to prepare for this talk, I was thinking this is a lot of information. Like, I don't know how possibly I could explain everything in an hour and a half. I'm just going to cover the basics. No, I remind you that I'm just gonna point out each skill so that you decide how you want to tackle this learning, because it usually takes more than an hour and a half. It takes 2, 3, 4 semesters, I would say, sometimes from PG7 to PG11, for example, in our Saturday courses. It is not done separately also, no? Many of these things you can learn in your English classes right now, because also in the textbook you have some of these activities. I just wanted to point them out so that you are able to identify this information when you perform a task in your English class, that you see that you are actually preparing for these types of activities. Now, I hope you're not hungry or not that hungry, because we are going to talk about food. I'm going to use some food metaphors because we all like food. Or at least we usually have it once a day at least. So I'm going to use some comparisons with food. So bear with me if you're hungry. Now, what are some of the skills I need? The first thing I have to learn is how to take notes. Sometimes we know how to do it in Spanish, but it is always good to be able to transfer this ability into English, especially as college students. As college students, we have to take lots of notes. And there was a question in the registration form, and one student asked me, like, how can I take better notes? I would say that the better notes are the ones you are taking if they make you remember the information. No? If you remember what you learned or what you listened, those are the best notes. Now, there are systems that favor memory, no? that favor processing of the information. Another distinction I would like to make is that in exams, no, like the Toefl IBT, you are allowed to make notes. No? Whereas in the Ielts, you are not really allowed to make notes, because basically the listening, the academic listening sections are the notes. That you have to fill out graphics or read sentences that summarize some information. So they are basically the notes. But in the TOEFL exam, you can take notes during all the sections. So what, if I have to compare note taking to a type of food, I would start with tacos. They look yummy. And you might be wondering, how can this be academic? And let me tell you something. Tacos are highly academic. They show you, tacos are life, I would say. But this time, if you are not a vegan, well, there are also vegan tacos. No? If you like this type of taco, which is taco al pastor, if you like them, then you will understand the importance of the elements of this taco. How many sections can you divide tacos in? How many sections does a taco have? Not really ingredients, but I'm going to talk more about elements. Here we have some three, no? Exactly. Aaron also says 3 tortilla or tortilla, meat and vegetables. No, the garden, we call it sometimes. So there are basically 3 layers, 3 capas, 3 layers. No? The tortilla is the basis, then there's the meat, and there's the vegetables. But let me ask you a very complex question here, plus the salsa, exactly, plus the salsa. But let me ask you a very complicated question now. What if I ask you to remove everything that is not essential in a taco? Like we are gonna make the cheapest, the simplest taco. What would you remove? What would you remove from the taco to make it a very, very, very simple taco? But it is still a taco. Cilantro, vegetables, salsa, exactly. Some people would remove the tortilla and sometimes replace it with a lettuce, no? And they call that a taco, which is not, but immediately you will say, well, it doesn't matter, no vegetables, no salsa, the meat and the tortilla, right? Meat and tortilla is fine, don't worry. The vegetables. So as you can see, you know more academic English than you think. Now, as you can see, we can perfectly distinguish between what is major and what is minor. Are you with me? When I ask you, okay, what makes the taco a taco? What is the simplest? What are the simplest elements that have to be present? We are talking here about main ideas, right? About main information. By applying this criteria to a taco, we would say, well, the tortilla and the meat have to be there, Otherwise, it's not a taco. And the rest of the things, the salsa, no, the salsa, the sauce, the onion, cilantro, lemon, pineapple, those things are, those things are additional. No? They are important, of course. You know, if you don't put any salsa on your taco, then why living? But they are not essential, right? Are we fine here? So, note taking. What does it take? First of all, I would say it takes the discrimination of the keywords, the main ideas, and the supporting details. No? The first thing you have to understand in English, and with the other skills, you will see how this is clearer. The first thing you have to understand in academic English is that there are some things that are essential, very, very important. And there are some other things that are, I wouldn't say irrelevant, because nothing is irrelevant in a text, for example. But definitely has less importance, and this is known as the supporting details. These supporting details make ideas more interesting, make ideas more complex, more elaborate. They will understand you better if you give supporting details, like, how was your weekend? Fine, it was great. Okay, I know, I understand. Your weekend was great. Give me more information. It was great. I had a great time. I gave a chat. Then I went on a picnic. Then I slept. I had a great breakfast. No, so those would be the supporting details. They are not irrelevant, but definitely the core information is, how was your weekend? It was great. That's the key word, or that's the key idea. So the first thing I would say, to note take correctly, there has to be separation between the main ideas and details. I usually do it like this. No? By the way, it's not a commercial, because I don't, it's on weekdays. No, the courses don't have any cost for students who are studying at FESA, so it's not like I get a commission for this commercial, but I teach the Toefl course. on weekdays. So we cover this information more in depth. We definitely don't have time to cover for all of that, but let's see, when we are listening, taking notes, we will organize usually the main idea or main ideas. And then my suggestion is to leave some space. It's called indentation. Indentation means to start with in a different side of the paper or the document. So you have, when you make your notes, you can start with that. First of all, some people would have to start making notes. There is a misconception. Sometimes I have, by teaching the courses, the preparation courses, I have observed some students that are definitely very self-confident. I would say is an asset, but they say, oh no, everything is here. Everything is here. It's very clear. I won't miss it. I won't miss anything. I'm taking like mental notes. I do not recommend it, especially if you're gonna pay for a test and it's gonna be a very hard test. And you might feel anxious and you might want to remember some of the information more clearly, even if you have a superb memory. So some people, I would say, how to make notes, start by making notes, taking notes. That's the beginning. Don't have them like in your head, but actually handwrite them. My first suggestion during the first stages of preparation for TOEFL IBT is handwritten notes. I know you like the phone, I know you like computer, I like typing too, but start with handwritten notes. Main idea, and then some indentation, some space to the on the left, indentation, and details. The use of bullets, viñetas, the use of bullets is also encouraged. Details are bulleted lists. Second, taking notes is not taking dictation, right? That's a distinction you have to make. Taking notes is not dictation. Some students believe that taking notes is like when the professor starts speaking, I start writing everything. And a lot of the questions were about what can I do to write faster? No, you don't have to write faster. What can I do not to miss information? Because when I'm writing something and it's difficult, then I'm not listening to the professor, and so I miss some information. Well, you don't have to do that in a very complex way. I would say you have to listen for the information, like to listen for groups of information. If you want to investigate about this, it's called thought groups. You have to wait until the speaker has already developed the idea. Because if you make notes right at the beginning and you never stop to listen, then your notes are going to have, they are not going to be notes, they are going to be a transcription, right, of the information, and you don't want a transcription, you want a summary. You want to make something smaller. So, well, there are thought groups first. Taking notes, so my suggestion is separate main ideas, learn to identify main ideas from details. Details usually have, like, how can I separate main ideas? Well, as I told you, it takes a while. It doesn't take one day, or it doesn't take a talk. But one thing you can do is to listen for connectors, no? Connectors like, for example, such as, for instance, prepare or announce details, right? Moreover, in fact, also announce details, introduce details, so you can check. That's the first thing. Now, when you do a listening, or when you go to YouTube and play your favorite academic English channel, no, whatever it is, TED Ed, Coursera, look for a lecture like that, no? Google lecture on psychology, lecture on physics, and then you listen for 5 minutes, 3 minutes, separate the main idea from details. Now, also, this is more, this type of practice is usually what you find in a TOEFL preparation course, no? Or on an Ielts preparation course. Main idea versus detail. Now, let's continue with our presentation today. So the first one is tacos, that is separate essential from details. Now, the next one is, don't note taking, it's paraphrasing. Sorry. The next one, sorry, no. The next one is note taking, but I'm going to talk about the structure. Something really beneficial here, and really positive about working with academic English is the structure. Why? Because academic English lectures and texts always have a defined order, a defined structure. And in many ways, well, a sandwich represents this structure, because also in the United States, it's very, very, very common to refer to a paragraph structure as a sandwich. No, some people even call it a sandwich paragraph. No, that means that the ingredients are usually layered out in the same order. The first piece of bread, no, here from top to bottom, is the introduction. Then we usually have one of the details, now one idea, one important idea with some information, interesting information. Then we have a second layer of another idea with more information. This is reflected in the paragraphs. All right, that's the key here. A sandwich text has layered paragraphs in order, that is, en capas. So we have usually, as you can see here, 5 paragraphs. No? Introduction, then we have a couple of 3 ingredient paragraphs, no, body paragraphs, and a conclusion. A sandwich is a very good representation of academic texts or academic content structure, because they are in the same order, and also because the introduction and the conclusion are usually the same thing. No? Not exactly the same. No, there are 2 separate pieces of bread. It's not the same piece of bread, but separate. So in this sense, a sandwich represents what academic content is. You will always have an introduction, some body paragraphs, no, with ingredients, very specific ingredients. As you can see here, one of them is just the lettuce, the other is the ham, just the ham, and the third one is tomato, just the tomato. No, they are not mixed together. And in the end, you will have a conclusion that will give you more ideas, that will round up the ideas presented throughout the text, right? So how does structure help us with note taking? How does it help with note taking? Well, because when you are listening or when you are reading, you will find the information in the same order. So that is very positive. I would say you already know where to look for this information. No? So in my experience, important information usually appears at the beginning. Important information, a summary of the text will appear in the first paragraph. No? If we talk about a 5-paragraph text, it will be in the first paragraph and the last one. And if it is a paragraph, as we will see later, if it is a paragraph, the important information will appear in the first or the second sentence and the last sentence. So this comparison is very, very useful to remember. And when you are taking notes, then let's recap both strategies. The first one is to identify, separate the main idea from details. That's the first one. And the second is how can you separate the main idea from details? Well, because you can identify that the main idea is usually at the beginning of a text, of a paragraph, of a talk, usually at the beginning, and the rest of the information are details. Now, there are major and minor details. Again, there are major and minor details, just as in the tacos, all right? We have some details like lemon, sauce, onion, cilantro, they call it coriander, of course, no? Cilantro, they also say in the US. And if I ask you which details are more important, that's your opinion. Which details are more important in a taco? Lemon or salsa? Salsa, no? For some of you will be lemon, for others will be salsa. So even details are classified into major and minor. So here in the previous note-taking suggestion I made, I may want to add this one, detail number 1, and sometimes you have a minor detail or example, right? So there are usually 3 levels. I'm going to classify it like this: main idea, major detail, or minor. Minor means it's less important. It has less information. Well, sorry, it's less related to the matter at hand. So please observe how in the diagram here, or in the outline here, I am dividing the ideas in 3 levels, no? The main idea on top, a little bit more to the right, the major detail, and a little bit more to the right, the minor detail. This usually helps you organize your notes better. Right. So how are you doing? We're like almost done. Let's say we have 20 minutes to go. I hope we can cover as much information as we can. So as I told you, in a sandwich, we can observe the structure of academic lectures, passages, everything you find in the Toefl exam and everything you find in the Ielts academic will follow a very defined structure. No, it's not like a novel, or it's not like an article that mixes information for literary purpose, for aesthetic enjoyment. This one is more rigorous, more plain, I would say, in a way. Interesting, complex, but plain. I wouldn't say plain, straightforward, maybe is the word better. Another technique another skill that is necessary for passing or succeeding in the Toefl exam or the Ielts or any other, even Cambridge examinations, no? Is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing means to say the same thing with your words, no? To say the same information with your words. This cannot be done without the mastery of grammar and vocabulary. No? So every time you learn grammar and new vocabulary, when you expand your vocabulary, you are learning how to paraphrase. This is especially in the context of crediting ideas. No, remember when you study in college, when you do research, you have to give credit to the people who, who passed you the knowledge on, who you learned from. So in the United States, for example, the policy on plagiarism is way harder. No, it is indeed a big issue if you copy information and you do not credit the person. So to avoid plagiarism, they will suggest you to paraphrase. They will suggest paraphrasing, which is, as I told you, to express the same idea with other words. Some students define paraphrasing as express the same idea with your words. I would disagree with that a little bit, because if your words are not of an advanced level, of an upper intermediate advanced level, then it's not useful. You have to paraphrase at the same level. Sometimes with your own words, yes, but not just that. Now, I wanted to show you this. It's personally, I'm not really a fan of Mexican crepas. All right. What do I mean when I say Mexican crepas? Crepes are something else. From France, I believe they're from France. And then they just put a little bit of something inside the crepa, sometimes nothing. But here in Mexico, what surprises me is like how we Mexicanize food from other countries, and we put pastor in it. Many other dishes also have pastor. No? Originally, they didn't have it. So these ones, somebody says, those are not for me neither. Some people like them. They're indeed very popular, crepas. So I would say paraphrasing is not like this. It's not like a Mexican crepe. It's not the same or different. No, that's my question. That's why I chose this Mexican crepa. Is it the same? Really? Is this a crepa? Sometimes no. Paraphrasing means to express, report the same information. All right. You don't have to add extra information that you know. Even if you are an expert in the topic, don't add information that was not there originally. That's the point with paraphrasing. You only change what was in the original source. Do not add your version or your information. Is it clear? So really, this crepa has a lot more than the original version. Some people like it, some people don't. Exactly. Alma says for paraphrasing, the use of synonyms is very useful. I agree with you. I couldn't agree more. And that's why we are going to cover the 3 more frequent ways to paraphrase. It depends on your expertise. It also depends on the case. No, on the practicality as well, practicality. 3 ways of paraphrasing. Use synonyms and opposites. No? As Alma in the chat is saying, thank you. Use synonyms and opposites. What's the problem with this type of paraphrase, especially like in the Toefl exam? is that you have to do it very quickly. So you have to have an extensive vocabulary sometimes. Of course, you can start to practice from today. When you are in the English class, you read a text on your book and you start to paraphrase, to explain it to yourself using synonyms, right? Another is to make an explanation. If you cannot paraphrase because you don't remember the word, no? For example, if you want to say the best thing I have learned, no, a valuable lesson in life. A valuable lesson in life can be paraphrased with a synonym, no, like a very important, a lesson in life that I treasure. And this is a synonym. An opposite can be when you say, this person is not very, this person is inefficient. This method is inefficient. And the opposite you can paraphrase, the opposite you can use is, this method is not very efficient. No? So you can paraphrase through synonyms, but also through opposites. That means to substitute one word for another. Be careful here. Again, you have to have extensive vocabulary or very good vocabulary. Another thing is that not all synonyms are interchangeable. No? So make sure when you use a synonym that it means more or less the same, no? Because you cannot exchange one word for another if they are not very similar. No? Then another way of paraphrasing is to make an explanation. No? It's a sport that you play with your feet. You have to kick a ball. You have to score a goal. That's an explanation. No? So you can use this word, make an explanation, for paraphrasing. There is a text and you change it into your own words, no? Because you don't know synonyms. It's as valid, I would say, is just as valid as using synonyms because it shows comprehension. Another way you can paraphrase is to use alternative grammatical structures, no? The most common one is to change from active to passive voice, right? That's the most common change we can make. Active to passive. Now, for example, help me in the chat if you want. Here we have two sentences. The hardest language to learn is Mandarin Chinese. Now, some students would say, do I have to change all of the sentence to paraphrase it? Do I really have to change all of it? No, just the key words. No, maybe just hardest. Can I paraphrase language? I doubt it. No, I would say it's also impractical. I wouldn't change it, but hardest is easier to paraphrase. So can I paraphrase Mandarin Chinese? No, proper names are usually not paraphrased. Specialized vocabulary is not paraphrased. So I can say the hardest language to learn is Mandarin Chinese. I can say the most difficult language to learn, I would also change it for master. No? Master. The hardest or the most difficult language to master is Mandarin Chinese. Now, that is a change with synonyms. Oh, here there is another difficult, complex. I agree with you, Alma. Now, the change in structure can be change Mandarin to the beginning. Mandarin Chinese poses great difficulty for learners, or poses the great test difficulty for learners. Mandarin Chinese is the most difficult language to master. Now, the second sentence here, rainforests are often located in the equator. This, for example, is a rainforest. Can I paraphrase it? Not really, it's a specialized term. It's the name of an ecosystem. Well, so you don't usually paraphrase it, but are often located. I can paraphrase often, and I can paraphrase located in the equator. I might not want to paraphrase that. As I told you, practicality is the principle. If I'm going to take a long time in an exam to paraphrase, then it's not useful. Now, look at this sentence, are often located. Is passive voice. So you can transform it into active and say, we or you can locate rainforests near the equator. Usually you can locate rainforest in the equator. No? Placed. Place would be, this is a good example of how words are similar, but they are not the same. So you say are placed. I would say, I took this rainforest and then I placed it here somehow. So it's not really a synonym. But it's a very good example of how some words are not equivalent. No? Excellent. Are usually found. And Rebecca, I would say ubicated is not accurate. But found, I like that one, Paola. Are often found. No? So do I have to change everything all the time? No, go for one. No? Rainforests are often found, are usually found, are commonly found. So that was paraphrasing. We have 3 more to go. As I told you, this would need more like a semester or 2 to go over them. Now, something else besides paraphrasing, reporting. If you are learning reported speech, there are several ways to go about this. PG7 is the classical reported speech. No, he said that, she said that, to use the change in tenses. In the TOEFL exam, for example, we do not really change with classical reported speech, but more we use reporting verbs. No? We use reporting verbs. Reporting means to express that the information you are using is not yours. It's also called quoting and citing. No? Quoting and citing. So this is basic. This is something basic in academic life, not just academic English, academic life. If the information is not yours, you have to say where you got it from. So here, what are some guidelines to report information in the TOEFL or the Ielts exam? No, you can, for example, introduce the source before quoting. For example, according to Professor Núñez, a very good way to paraphrase is to use synonyms. No? According to the lecture, psychology is the science that studies behavior. According to the University of Cardiff, academic skills are abilities required for succeeding in college. And that is to cite the source. According to, you can start with that simple phrase, according to, or in the words of Einstein, no, in the words of Newton, in the words of Barack Obama, so you can introduce the source. Another can be marked quotations. Quotations are these little symbols, no, punctuation symbols. And so you can say, I quote. If you are speaking, you can say, I quote. You say the information as you read it, exactly as you read it, and then you can say, end of quote. End of quote. So you can use the punctuation symbol directly. This is more when you are writing a paper in English, not in the exam. And one that I suggest now is use strong verbs to report ideas. Some of you in PG8 or PG9, 10 might be learning reporting verbs. And this is more common to use in the Toefl and Ielts exam, reporting verbs, not reported speech, reporting verbs. What are some of them? Agree with, no? You can say, well, the professor agrees with the theory of relativity. In the lecture, the professor explains 4 types of management. And so it's better to use reporting verbs. And with these reporting verbs, you avoid the complex rules of classic reported speech, which is a change in tense. Very quickly, summarizing. What is it to summarize? Tell me, what would be the best summary? If you have to choose between these two, what is the summary of a taco? The tortilla. I agree. Yeah, some of you would say it's not the most relevant if a tortilla, but in fact, in the photograph is a salt taco. Es un taco de sal. It's very simple, but it's a taco. Okay, so summarizing means to reduce the information to the most important concepts, not to change anything, not even sometimes to paraphrase, but to summarize means to reduce elements. So when you summarize, my suggestion is I can identify the main point. And when you identify the main points, you only mention those in a text. For example, in the TOEFL exam, in the writing section, they give you a text, then they play a lecture, and you have to summarize it. The lecture is 3 minutes long, and you have to summarize that information into a paragraph or 2. In the speaking section of the TOEFL exam, you are asked to summarize a recording. The professor speaks for about 4 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes. And you only have 1 minute to repeat what the professor said. This means you only have to mention the most important information. So, well, a summary is a little bit more complex than this, but I can tell you about establishing relationships between the concepts. This is usually a very good summary. For example, this is from the Ielts writing section. All right, this exercise comes from an Ielts writing section. And some students make the following mistake when the Ielts writing is asking, summarize the main features. Summarize the main features. And the students go like, well, in Great Britain, 60% of young people prefer cars. 10% prefer the motorcycle. 30% prefer the bicycle. Now in the USA, 60% prefer a car, 30% prefer a bicycle, 10% prefer a bicycle, sorry, and 30 a motorcycle. That is not summarizing. I am saying the information in the same length, in the same way that I found it. So that is not a summary. A summary is to identify the most important features. For example, I would go first with this one. Why? Because it's the tallest bar. That means it's the most important. And then I would start with a relationship between the other ideas. I would compare and say, well, according to this graph, the car is, or cars are preferred the most in France. Okay, or more people prefer to travel by car in France. And I already summarized this and this. I mentioned the three of them. Instead of mentioning one by one, I summarized by mentioning the relationships. So when you go to a summary, when you read a text, probably you have to look at the relationships between pieces of information. Now, this is, as I told you, this is from the Ielts writing. I have to describe a graphic. To end with this talk, synthesizing. What do you see here? What can you make with these things in the picture? A cake, no? Rebecca. A chocolate cake, Candy says. Great. Exactly. When you summarize, you would do the following exercise. When you summarize, what are the minimal ingredients of a cake? Well, I would say flour, no, milk. Some cakes have no milk. So flour, eggs, maybe some water, maybe not. Since I'm not a chef, I'm probably making a mistake, but let's say some butter. When you summarize, you take just the essentials. For example, chocolate cake, no more. Chocolate is not that essential to make a cake, so you would not use it. When you summarize, then you just mark the essentials. But let me show you. When you synthesize, you do the following. You synthesize like this. That means you take different sources, different elements. Usually in the Toefl exam, it's a reading passage and a recorded lecture. They are usually two sources. You take these two sources, you take these two ingredients, and you mix them into one. But you do not add anything that was not there. Important, your opinion is not required here. No. Only with the ingredients that you had originally, right? Then you create from these ingredients that are separate, you create one thing. You create, let's say, a new one. Or you mix them together. Today's talk was more like an introduction for you to be aware of how the activities we do in classes, in English classes, regular classes. You don't need to begin with anything in special. Every time you take your English class, you can practice these abilities. Now, for presenting an exam like the Toefl or the Ielts, you will need some I would say, some special training, no? Either with a teacher or with materials, no? With books from different publishing houses. You can find them online as well. But I would say specifically practicing note-taking, paraphrasing, you have to look, there is not a book for all of them together, no? There is not really a book. This is something you learn to practice, but you can also Google each one of them separately, no? You can also Google them as paraphrasing for Toefl, summarizing for Toefl, and they will give you some extra sources to practice that. Good. There were other questions in the chat, I would say. There were other questions like how to write better, how to overcome anxiety, how to, yeah, I would say how, one of the questions was, if I don't have any feedback, how can I improve my English or know if I'm doing well or not? But these have to be answered in other talks because this really was a world, no? It's a world. Even with these 4 or 5 skills, it was very difficult to summarize. So my suggestion is first, think about the academic skills. Again, think about them. Every time you are in contact with English, academic English, practice these skills, no? One of the simplest methods to do it is just to listen and read actively, right? That's the simplest thing you can do and start with it. What is active listening, active reading? When you are listening to content that is educational, ask yourself, make a stop and ask yourself, what did I just listen to? How can I explain it? So it is a very good practice, for example, to watch TED videos. This is TED Ed, you can Google them. They are 5-minute videos on any topic on earth. Any topic, really. They have a wide variety of topics. So watch a video, 5 minutes, and then after that, take a moment and think, what is the main point of this? What is exactly the main information of this? If you do this repeatedly, you will see a change, not just in your English, but in the way you process information. Another technique or tip to practice continuously is to find a topic that you are interested in. You can also find it here, for example, on National Geographic or on the BBC, you can find a piece of news and get used to comparing information. For example, if you watch a video on how, I don't know, how COVID is behaving now in India, no? And you watch a video about this on the BBC, and then you go and read an article from a newspaper, and you compare this information and say, okay, this is more or less the same information. No, they digress here. The information is different, and this is the difference. This is also another way of practicing, summarizing, synthesizing, and many others. Well, it's time to go. It's time to end with our talk. Very, very nice to have you here.